Tonight, President Biden is in isolation as he's fighting off symptoms from COVID-19. But he's also in isolation in the figurative sense as he is now fighting off new calls from his own party to get out of the 2024 race. The party that Biden has devoted his life to is unleashing a new and really public effort to push him out of challenging Donald Trump for the White House. A slew of House Democrats have joined two more prominent Democratic senators tonight in calling for Biden to step aside. All of it, we are told, has President Biden seething tonight, with much of his anger directed at Nancy Pelosi. That's because some of the names that are calling for him to drop out of the race are her close allies. And in the View from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware tonight, where President Biden finds himself, that is no coincidence.
Did you consult or coordinate with her on your statement?
I did not. I gave a heads up after I made a decision to a leadership, but I did not coordinate and did not ask permission. I reached this conclusion with really an agonizing decision based on what I'm seeing in the data.
That is Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. You'll remember her from the January 6th Congressional Committee. She is one of Pelosi's closest allies. That's why Wolf was asking if she coordinated her call for Biden to get out of this race with the former House Speaker. And all this comes as the New York Times is also out with a doozy of a report tonight that says President Biden is also irritated with former President Barack Obama, seeing his former running mate, and I'm quoting the New York Times now, as the puppet master behind the scenes of all of these calls for him to get out of the race. Biden has not said he is going to do so. He's not moved an inch on that. He says he looks forward to returning to the campaign trail next week once COVID is behind him. But we are closely monitoring what has developed into an intense and fluid situation tonight, seemingly changing by the hour at this point, as Democratic donors are also certainly feeling it. That's why Vice President Harris had to get on the phone with them today from the West Wing, as many of them say that their wallets are closed until this matter is resolved. Joining me tonight, Bakari Sellers, a former Democratic state rep from South Carolina, former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, and Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton. And Bakari, I mean, to see this reporting from Carl Bernstein tonight on CNN in the last hour saying that how Biden is feeling as he is lashing out and seething at Pelosi and Obama, it is pretty stunning to see such a break between three figureheads in the Democratic Party.
No, but I actually think in this particular situation, the president of the United States is right. I mean, I have even echoed on X or Twitter or whatever Elon Musk calls it today, my disappointment with the leaders of the party for the way that they're handling the situation. People I respect, people that I have a great deal of love for. But Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're committing political malpractice. More harm has been done to Joe Biden since June 27th than Joe Biden did to himself on June 27th. And I think everyone knows that public pressure is not going to be the way that Joe Biden bows out of this race. But the fact that they've allowed this to boil over in public, and at the end of the day, and there are two things, and I want to be, we'll address it later, but there are two things. One, the way that a lot of my friends on the left are handling this situation by simply saying that we want Joe Biden to gracefully leave the stage. But the fact is, we know donors, we know leadership, we know other people not only want donors to leave the stage, but they want Kamala Harris to leave the stage. It shows that either you're out of step or out of tune with where the base and voters are, or you just don't give a damn anymore. And what I am concerned about is the fact that Nancy Pelosi is probably the greatest speaker we've ever had in the history of the United States of America. And I don't want this to be her legacy.
Mayor, how do you see it? I mean, you're familiar with all of these figures in your party. It's pretty remarkable to see this break between them.
It is. I mean, first, I've talked with you about the fact that I feel for Joe Biden. It's an incredibly difficult moment, incredibly difficult decision. I had to make a much more humble version of this decision myself when you have to think about stepping away from the stage. And I understand why that brings out anger, frustration, et cetera. But I want to say, ironically, in a group of 8-year-olds, I think Nancy Pelosi is being the adult in the room. I think Nancy Pelosi is actually talking to people about what they're feeling and encouraging people to express their feelings so that we can figure this out together. I have never, I don't believe this is inside the family, behind closed doors kind of thing. I think This has to be out in the open, and we have to deal with it once and for all because the stakes are so high. And in the end, this is an organic problem. This is not a created problem. I respect Bakari a lot. I don't think this comes from the left. I don't think this is artificial. It predates the debate. It's an organic problem. And so for a lot of people, it's the time to say the emperor has no clothes and we have to decide what we're doing here. And I got to tell you, I would follow Nancy Pelosi anywhere because she can count votes. And I think her singular concern right now is how do we win? And that's what everyday Democrats, everyone I'm talking to, is obsessed with one thing. How do we win? And they don't feel like we're winning right now.
Yeah, and she had that really blunt call with Biden where he was saying, well, that's not what the polls I'm saying. And she's like, okay, well,
Show me the polls, she said.
Mike Donilon, one of his most trusted advisors, put him on the phone. And Carl Bernstein has been talking to a lot of Democrats about what is happening with Biden, who obviously is not surrounded by a lot of people right now. He's got COVID, he's isolating. And this is what Carl said just last hour.
Well, the president himself has now moved from being what was called contemplative about his situation to recognition that it is very unlikely that his candidacy can be sustained. And it's true of his family as well. The president is angry. He feels abandoned. The word abandoned was used several times in discussions I've had with people in the White House, the people that he has supported through his political career and helped advance through the ladder of leadership in Washington have now turned their back on him, in his view, and in a really ugly way.
I mean, the last time, Shermichael, that we saw discord between the candidate and the party's leaders, this obvious right before the election, was 2016, when all Republican leaders were essentially abandoning Donald Trump in a very different situation.
Yeah, he ended up winning. I think this is a little different, though. From a Republican's perspective, strategically speaking, we're loving this. Every day that this lingers, and I think Bakari does have a point, the more this infighting continues in the public display, I think Democrats are running the risk of forcing a lot of their voters to become discouraged. I think political disenchantment will eventually set in. And many people that they need, particularly considering that this is an electoral college race, 4 states, right? They're going to stay home. So Republicans are looking at turning out Trump's voters. They're looking at low propensity voters. And they're saying if we can maximize and maintain 2020 levels and maybe increase 2 to 3% in a state like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, there's a mathematical path to beyond 270. And so I think, just being objective here, Kaitlin, I think Democrats are making a catastrophic mistake at this point.
By trying to get Biden out.
Absolutely. And I don't know how you pull this genie back at this point.
But what about that? Because it's not just through a political lens. I mean, the New York Times also says that Obama was shaken when he saw Biden at the fundraiser in June by how much he's aged and how disoriented he seems. Seth Moulton came out today with an op-ed saying that when he saw Biden in Normandy last month, he's known him for 10 years. That he says that Biden didn't seem to recognize him. You know, he didn't put that in his July 6th call for Biden to get out of the race. I do think it raises questions, though, if people are seeing things and not saying it publicly.
Okay. I mean, I hear you. We're running for president of the United States now. Seth Moulton's wanted to be president of the United States for a very long period of time, and I think he's gotten less votes than I have.
Okay, but what about Obama being shaken?
But I hear you. I mean, I was being flippant with Seth, and I'm not going to be flippant with the former president of the United States. So I hope viewers see it as such.
That.
But one of the things I will say is, so what? All right, we're in the middle of July. First of all, elections aren't won and lost in July, but we have a decision to make. Either we can continue to try to fall in love with my good friend Mayor de Blasio, or we can fall in line. And that's what I'm trying to get people to do. There's only one person who can determine whether or not he's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And it's not Dr. Obama. It's not Dr. Schumer. It's not Dr. Pelosi. It's not Dr. de Blasio. It's Joe Biden. And so allow the man the space to make the decision. He says he's in the race. If things change, if he evaluates things differently, so be it. But what we're doing in public right now, the George Clooney op-eds, the Adam Schiff, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that these things aren't done in a vacuum.
But you think he should stay in?
What I think he should do is make a decision himself. And I'm very clear. But
he's made the decision.
Exactly. I'm very clear. If Joe Biden makes the decision to get out the race, there's only one person who can be the nominee. But I will tell you this, the person who performs the best with white college voters, white suburban voters, white women voters. The person who puts us at 50% with white voters, which are 70% of the electorate, his name is Joe Biden. If we start with anybody else, we're probably at 38%, 40% of white voters, which we started with in 2012. And that means we have to have Negroes rain from the sky. We have to have a huge output of Latino voters, and we have to have young voters perform at rates that we haven't seen in a very long period of time. And so if we want to talk numbers, I would challenge Nancy Pelosi and anybody else to show me the numbers, get Donald on the phone, and let's figure this out.
Well,
it's a huge risk. It's a huge risk, but also knowing Biden, he's very stubborn and he doesn't like to have his hand forced. I think people who love him would describe him that way. Is there a chance he's more dug in by seeing the growing calls to get out?
I think there's a couple of different things here. First of all, I think he was given some space initially. Some of the media outlets got involved, but the party folks generally hung back the first week or two. He had that space. Now it's an organic feeling coming from people all over the party. And we've seen situations where the leadership speaks from all different angles, and you've got to pay attention to that.
Who would you want to replace him?
We're going to come to that, but let me stay on this. I'll certainly happily talk about that. Let me talk about this. Here's the bottom line. I disagree respectfully with the notion that Joe Biden has this lock on white people and the race is static and the numbers are static and everything's okay. I think what we've seen is a steady deterioration, and I'm very sad about that. If you asked me a couple of months ago, I had a lot of hope that Joe Biden would be the person who could pull it out again, but a lot of things have changed, and unfortunately they've played into, I believe, the Republicans' hands. Now, I think when you talk about the kind of rejuvenating dynamic of a new candidate, and I really strongly believe this is a country that loves new things. This is a country that pays attention to something different.
We've talked a lot about this. Do you think that Biden should get out of the race?
I am one of those people who wants to give him the space, so I'm not going to say those words. I think the facts are becoming increasingly clear. But here's my point. You bring out a new person. You bring out a new campaign. You revitalize.
And respectfly, Michael, let me just say that's the rub. That's the rub in our party right now, because I would sit back and say, Mayor de Blasio, you have served this city admirably, and to be mayor of this city not once but twice shows that you have some chops that not most people have. And I would also follow up and say, well, who do you want?
And I'm staying here for a moment because I think we have to settle this first question. We really do.
But I can't allow you respectfully as a Democrat in the party to sit here and be like, well, I like kind of Gretchen, or I like.
We have a group of senators and governors.
See,
any of them, and I think this is the point. Any of them give us a new chance.
The answer is not.
And right now, we need a reset.
Mr. Mayor, just like as the Republican here, and I want to take off my Republican hat, just as a strategist.
On the show,
as a strategist, I've worked on 3 Republican presidential campaigns,
Republicans are nervous
a ton of other campaigns, federal up and down. Mathematically, some of the names that I've seen circulating on your side, they do not perform better than the sitting president, respectfully. And just being objective here, I have seen no evidence, even as a Republican, that Whitmer or Newsom or anybody else can somehow improve their numbers in 90 days. That doesn't make any sense, Mr. Mayor.
And your party want Joe Biden to be the opponent?
Exactly.
I'm being objective. I'm not being a partisan. I'm purely being objective here.
But it is convenient.
We're all challenging each other.
I know, but I'm trying to figure out why my mayor can't say Kamala Harris.
Oh, I can say Kamala Harris easily.
Okay, so my point to Tommy Vitter and John Favreau and Jon Stewart, my point to Barack Obama and Clooney and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer is the audacity, right, to simply say that Joe Biden should step out without saying that Kamala Harris is the rightful choice is a problem.
Okay, and I want your response to that, but we're going to talk about it after the break.
That is called a transition.
Look at that. What the mayor was going to say, he'll say it right after this break.